This episode is brought to you by Google Health. Stop chasing someone else's definition of health. What matters is what's healthy for you. Google Health offers a new kind of coach built with Gemini for effortless tracking, sleep insights, and holistic coaching tailored to you. Visit googlestore.com to learn more and start a new relationship with your health. Requires Google account, Google Health app, internet, and Google Health Premium subscription. Features subject to change. Availability and results vary. Not intended for medical purposes. Works independently of Gemini apps. Check responses for accuracy.
This summer, serve up the cookout classics, Kraft mayo and dressing. Toss green salads with delicious ranch dressing or zesty Italian. Serve smooth, craveably creamy potato salads with mayo. We all know it's not a cookout without Kraft.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
Hello, Eagles and draft fans. Welcome to the Big Legged Wastelanders podcast. I am your host, Wannab, with the Eagles Film Room on Patreon, working with Johnny Page and Shane Half. Please come check us out and try out the free trial. It is the best Eagles content out there. Okay, I don't know what the best is, but it's pretty darn good, and it's worth watching. Today we're going to be talking about the 90-man roster once again, a little preview before training camp starts, and we're going to talk about the defensive tackle depth chart from top to bottom, currently on the 90-man roster. And I will be starting today with Byron Young. I have a complicated history with Byron Young. In some circles, in very public circles on the internet, I've been called the Byron Young hater. I feel bad. I have criticized his play a bit vociferously with great video detail at times and quite publicly. I even made a TikTok about it, and I barely have used TikTok in my life. So, am I a Byron Young hater? No. But I am an Eagles fan first and foremost, and I'd like to think a burgeoning analyst second most of the sport. And in both cases, as an analyst and as a fan, I don't understand how Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni, because he owns all of it, in theory, he's the head coach supposedly, and our defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, I can't understand how none of the three of them put their foot down and said, hey, we need to take a look at another defensive tackle for either Gabe Hall, Ty Robinson, or some sort of schematic change to account for these guys, or we need to start cycling the back end of the roster for run-stuffing defensive tackles off the scrap heap throughout the league and see if we can upgrade our run defense at DT4, defensive tackle 4. Instead, that never happened all season long, and our run defense, it did go backwards slightly from the previous year, our run D, and there are many reasons why that happened, but one of them is the depth with our run defense dramatically worsened at the defensive tackle position. Defensive tackle in this scheme is where the most stress is placed when it comes to stopping the run, and that's the case with most football schemes, but with the Fangio scheme in particular, I'd say it's even above the average for an NFL scheme in terms of how much stress gets placed on the defensive tackle position here to stop the run. They like their quasi-light boxes, they like their too-high defense, and they like their wide nines and their 4-2-5. And the wider those nines are, those defensive ends playing a 9 technique, like wide out, like a wide 5 or a wide 9 outside the tight end, that's more space for those gap-eating defensive tackles to clog up together. And it's not an easy task. So Byron Young, I watched him as a draft prospect. I have vague recollections of seeing him have some incredibly impressive 1.5 gap run snaps, like the kind that make you stand up in your chair a little bit, like, oh, that's interesting. And they were single blocks. He wasn't being double teamed. And he stood up the offensive lineman, peeked in the one gap, his primary gap, and shed the offensive lineman, got into the second gap, and really controlled him and made a nice play or two against the run. I'm like, whoa, this is a 1.5 gapper. This is a Vic Fangio defensive tackle. I watched more, and boy, it was night and day when he had to take on a double team. He got moved, and I did not like it. And at times, I even saw him 1.5 gap against some of the better offensive linemen, and he didn't look like he was going to affect the secondary gap as well as one would hope. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe he offers more as a pass rusher, And it's weird because at times he looks pretty athletic, and other times you realize this is not a pass rusher. So I could see someone talk them into him in the third round. I can't remember what round he went in. It's probably the second or third is my guess. I don't even know. And he was not the defensive tackle for me. I would not have drafted him, even though I thought it was a reasonable decision, depending on your scheme, to draft him in the third or fourth round. And then I forgot about him. And then I saw the Eagles picked him up. It was, when was it that they picked him up? I think it was during the 2024 season, if I remember correctly. I might be remembering that wrong. I believe they picked him up from some of the team's practice squad, or he was just cut. Can't remember which. But regardless of how they acquired him, I looked at his tape from the previous year at his previous NFL location when we acquired him, and whoa, it was bad. It was like I'm playing my way out of the league bad. He was much larger than I remembered. My guess is he tried to put on more weight to take on double teams. I don't know. I wasn't there. I wasn't in the room. I wasn't in the decision process for that team. Maybe he put on this size to be able to take on those double teams that I said he struggled against. Maybe he did it to be stronger 1.5 gapping against single blocks from NFL offensive linemen, because if it was hit or miss and a little bit Jekyll Hyde-ish as a college athlete, imagine what it's going to be as a pro athlete. And maybe that's how he attempted to adapt. Well, that attempt failed. He just looked like he had too much bad weight. He looked slow. I don't know if he was injured or not and playing through it. And he looked like he was playing his way out of the league. The Eagles took him on as a reclamation project. In comes the 2025 season. And they put in some work. He put in some work. And I'm proud of both of them, both the Eagles and Byron Young, for putting some work into that reclamation project and getting improvement. He looked better in the NFL preseason in 2025. He looked lighter, quicker. He looked more like the college defensive tackle that I watched as a prospect. And in the preseason, he had some good moments. Gabe Hall had some good moments in the preseason as well. I'll get into that in a minute. And then after one or two games that was missed by Byron Young due to injury, he came in. He was even better. I was like, okay. I would not have picked him up due to a combination of my evaluation of him as a draft prospect plus what I saw from him the prior year at the other location. However, they might have done something good here. And I was like, maybe defensive tackle 4 is going to be okay this year. Then the regular season happened. And somewhere in the middle of game 1, I was worrying about DT4. Now, the Dallas Cowboys had some smash mouth offensive linemen and some powerful dudes. So I could understand some weakness against the run in that game. But there were some of those. I mentioned he has Jekyll and Hyde snaps, Byron Young. Well, I can't remember which one is the bad one, Jekyll or Hyde. But whoever the bad one is, too much of that showed up on the tape. It was not good. And I had doubts about being able to rely on him right there at that point, game 1. And those doubts continued game 2, game 3. And then probably by game 3, I'm saying, folks, we got to do something here. This is not working out. And even though it wasn't working out and continued to not work out all season long, their success rate against the run plummeted when he was on the field. And the tape was worse than the number. It was bad, folks. He'd sprinkle in one of those 1.5 gaps that I saw in college where he'd look really good and get to a secondary gap, or maybe he'd take a offensive lineman trying to reach him in wide zone, use his momentum against him and park him in a gap and occupy 2 gaps that way. He would do some good things on the field once in a while where you're like, okay, this looks like a Fangio defensive tackle. Then he'd have a few reps where you're like, meh. And then he'd have a couple reps where it'd be like, oh my God, is he on ice skates? Are the soles of his shoes frictionless? He's literally gliding across the field like an ice skater from like a single block. You can't play football that way. You just can't. You need to know what you're going to get out of the guy from snap to snap with some level of consistency so you could plan your scheme around the strengths and weaknesses of that player. You can't treat him like he's going to be able to play defensive tackle like our top 3, and he'll show that 1 or 2 snaps, and then, whoa, mama, he doesn't show it. So the tape was worse than the number in terms of how the success rate plummeted. Now, later in the season, the success rate improved somewhat, and I think that was because we started playing some really bad football teams towards the end of the season that quasi-quit on their season, and he played a lot of snaps those games, so that might have helped his success rate somewhat later in the season. But unless he dramatically improves, they have to replace him. I don't think he should even be on the roster, and it's a little bit concerning to me that already in OTAs, he's being presented as DT4. And most of the media is like, oh, yeah, he should be a solid DT4. What? What football are you watching, folks? I know you got the all-22 just like I do. No, people, no. So, Byron, if you hear this message, do whatever you got to do to get better. And if you need to change your approach on how you 1.5 gap to do that, maybe play a little bit more aggressively at the snap and fire off the ball to deliver a blow, assuming your coaches are going to allow you to do that. Please talk to your coaches about that. I hope it works out for you, my man. I hope it does. All right, moving on to the next, Gabe Hall. We signed him as a UDFA prior to the 2024 season. He is a long, tweenerish 3-4 defensive end type. I say tweenerish because he's got that 6'6", long-armed 3-4 defensive end prototypical build that we think of from years ago. And he's clearly more of an inside player. He's not a defensive end. He's not a 4-3 or 4-2-5 edge player. But yet he's kind of a tall drink of water, 6'6", 290-ish pounds at the combine. Spent that year, that Super Bowl year, on the practice squad. And I watched his preseason, and there were some glimpses of, okay, this guy can maybe play a little if he works on his body and works on his game. There's something there that he could maybe be a 1.5 gapper in the middle line, especially in 5-down odd fronts when they're in base defense. He looks like he could probably do that with a little work. Had some bad reps, had a few good ones, had some mediocre ones. Looked like he needed a year. He got his year of development. He came back. There were reports of him playing better in camp in 2025. In the preseason, he played very well. And then the regular season came, he made the initial 53, and they cut him like a week or two later. I can't remember exactly when. And he played in the Cowboys game, and he wasn't amazing. He certainly wasn't as effective as he was in the preseason, but he looked playable. And the thing about me with Gabe Hall, who, by the way, only ended up playing in 2 games total last year, and there was not a lot of snaps. But the thing about Gabe Hall is I know what he is snap to snap. He's not a world beater, but it looks like he's developed to the point that he can give you a little bit of 1.5 gapping defensive tackle in this scheme consistently. He's got the high pads because he's 6'6", but he doesn't play with a high pad level. He's pretty good at coming off the ball low. As we all know in football, oftentimes low man wins in the trenches, and he does a solid job staying low. I even saw him take on some double teams and look respectable. He's probably not the type of guy you want unless he puts on some size, taking on a ton of doubles, but he wasn't atrocious at it from the little bit I saw of it. To me, he should have been DT4 last year. You at least know what you're getting snap to snap. It's not amazing, but that's okay because he's DT4. But the bad snaps from Gabe Hall didn't seem to be as horrendous as the bad snaps from Byron Young. So he did improve year to year. If he's the same player or even hopefully slightly improved from last season, I don't see why he can't contribute as a defensive tackle 4 or 5. He's reasonably sturdy, not particularly explosive, so I don't like him on stunts unless he becomes more athletic in the offseason. But on slants, he seemed good enough. As I mentioned, he can 1.5 gap a little bit. He can take on doubles occasionally. I'd probably prefer him more for 5-down odd fronts than the 4-2-5. If he can he become more of a space heater? He has the frame for it. I'd say it's possible. He has a large frame. He's not a weakling. And even though he's not an explosive athlete, he's not a great mover in space. He's not terrible in space, and he is pretty nimble, despite not being that amazing mover athletically. So even if he doesn't size up, I can still see him being solid enough with a little bit of technique improvement and experience to be defensive tackle 4 or 5. So I'm somewhat optimistic about Gabe Hall. I don't know why he hasn't made a faster jump sooner or why he fell all the way out of the draft. Maybe there's something about him I don't know. He looked, as a draft prospect, not amazing to me and a bit tweenerish, but he looked like a guy who, even though I would not have drafted him, should not have fallen all of the way out of the draft. So hopefully he can put it together, work ethic-wise, body-wise, technique-wise, because the ingredients are there for him to be a contributor. Ty Robinson, the controversial 4th-round draft pick from 2025. Now, I know people were not happy about the pick for multiple reasons, one being his age. A lot of times if you have one dominant season as an older senior, that can be fool's gold. I wasn't worried about that as much. To me, his one dominant season or his one good season in college was more because of a body change than it was anything else. Like, he slimmed down. To me, he looked like he was playing at a heavier weight and looked physically slower the prior years. So to me, if he came into the NFL with the same body, you could probably find a role for him. He, at the college level, even though I did like him a little bit as a day 3 prospect and figured the Eagles would like him knowing what Vic and Howie tend to go for. I did notice weakness at the point of attack, even in college, even in his strong season. I felt like, okay, either this guy has to get a little stronger or you have to be creative about how you use him. He was particularly effective from the nose position as a pass rusher and otherwise, even though he's not the prototypical nose tackle, and he clearly has some strength issues at the point of attack. In a weird way, some guys just have a knack for playing nose, mobile guys who aren't necessarily big space eaters, so I could maybe see him having some value there when they go to their 6-man fronts. I don't know the name of the front yet. I'm going to do some research on it, but I noticed Fangio playing more often last year a 6-man front that was not his typical 6-man front. It was not his 40 front with the 2 eyes and 2 5 techs. It was more of an odd front. It looked almost to me like an underfront / bare front on steroids. It would be either a 5 or 6-man front depending on how many blockers lined up on the line of scrimmage. And on the one side of the line, they'd have a 1 tech just on the shoulder of the center. One spot over, they'd have a 3 tech. Another spot over, they'd have a 5 tech. And all 3 offensive linemen on that weak side of the line of scrimmage would be covered up. And that freed you up to be a little bit more aggressive. Oftentimes, either the 3 tech or the 1 tech was penetrating and slanting and being aggressive, and it was nice. And to me, you could take Ty Robinson, put him as the 1 tech / nose in that 6-man front, and he'll get the job done. Now, politically, that might be a tough sell because some of their higher paid guys might say, hey, I would like a little bit of that 1 tech action on the 6-man front, please. My people will talk to your people. And Ty Robinson doesn't have that kind of pull, but he did keep guys happy, so they want to re-sign. So all that does factor in, unfortunately. But I digress. So there's little niche roles with Ty Robinson where I felt to myself as a draft prospect, if you took a risk on him on the 4th round, it'd be reasonable because even though I noticed some weakness at the point of attack, I felt like he had some niche uses. You could put him as a nose that's aggressive, that's not necessarily 2 gapping or 1.5 gapping. You can put him as the 3-4 defensive end and a 5 down front, and he could survive here and there, even though he's going to get moved a little bit in the run game. He gives you good second effort, and he's aware of his weaknesses. That's one thing I like about him. He knows, okay, I'm probably not going to be able to 1.5 gap the way a lot of other guys do, and come up with creative solutions. And I also felt that with their condensed fronts, where they have their 40 front with the 2 eyes and the 2 5 techs, you could just play him at 5 tech. Unfortunately, in 2025, they didn't play those 40 fronts as often because teams wised up on schematically a way to attack them, and Vic did not adjust. But it's still part of their game plan, and they still use it on occasion. So there's niche uses for Ty Robinson. I think it's even possible, it's conceivable, you could play him occasionally as an early down defensive end, as an edge to help toughen you up versus a run, almost like a Brandon Graham style type guy. So to me, he's not a useless player. He's only entering his 2nd year at a position that takes time to develop, and you have him on a dirt cheap 4-year contract. To me, he makes the 53, even if he's not going to be a high snap rotation guy or potentially not even active on some game days. How the competition plays out in camp, how much Ty Robinson may or may not have developed, how much these newcomers bring competition to things that I'm going to get into in a moment, may determine Ty Robinson's usage. I'm not as down on the draft pick as most people are. This is a defensive tackle that they took in the 4th round in a draft where I was struggling to find guys 4th round and later that I wanted, and I think he has shown enough that he might become useful. I actually would have played him ahead of Byron Young last year. And now Ty Robinson did get moved off the ball quite frequently, but his worst reps weren't as bad as Byron Young's worst reps. And some of the times where his reps looked terrible, it was because he was away from the play. The play was away from him, and he started to realize he wanted to come off his block to go to the other side of the line of scrimmage. The offensive lineman used his momentum against him and pancaked him. Well, it looks terrible. And it's the sort of thing some media people will highlight and be like, ooh, he's terrible against the run. But it didn't actually affect the play if people were truly breaking it down. So I think if you work with his strengths and weaknesses a little bit, he could have been a better DT4 than even Byron Young was last year. He does have a way to go. And ideally he does need to get stronger at the point of attack. On to the next. UR Bernard, everybody's favorite 7th-round pick from Nigeria, the new Nigerian nightmare. So it's hard for me to have a football opinion about UR Bernard, but you guys know me. I have football opinions quite quickly, and I'm not afraid to share them. And I realize not all my opinions are accurate. No one's is. But it's good to hear everybody's different perspectives. The first time I saw him, and I only saw a handful of clips of this guy, just like everybody else, not clips of him playing football, clips of him running through drills. My first thought was, this guy's not built like a typical defensive tackle. And then I saw him move in the drills, and I'm like, okay, he looks very linearly explosive, but when he has to stick his foot in the ground and change direction, it looks a little sluggish and long-legged. What is this guy's role going to be? Do we even know he's truly a defensive tackle yet? Is he a blocking tight end? Is he a defensive end who comes in as a run stuffer? What exactly is this guy going to be? Is he going to be a pass rusher? Is he going to be a run stuffer? I don't know. Is he even a football player yet? This is a guy who, as far as I know, has not played a high level of football anywhere. And it's his first year in the NFL. And between that and the little bit I saw of his body and his movements and the drills that I did not like, I highly doubt that he's going to be a significant part of the rotation in year one. Most likely, he's going to get an ouchie, and they're going to give him a development year without taking the chance of him being claimed in waivers, and they're going to phantom IR him. Towards the end of training camp, when it's time to do your initial 53 cuts, you can designate some guys for IR, and they can stay on IR, and they don't have to be subject to waivers. You don't have to actually cut them and then put them on IR. It's not clear what the limit is to me. Some people were saying 2 players a few years ago. Now it seems like it's almost more than that. So I'm curious. We'll see. Now, you could probably put as many of guys on IR as you want to stay on IR, but I'm referring to IR with a designation to possibly return. And the limit for that, I believe, is either 8 or 10 guys. I can't remember. Either way, they could probably phantom IR him with a designation to return in case he does develop dramatically. Give him something to look forward to, something to work toward. Maybe if you show improvement, we can bring you back to the active roster during the end of the season, get you a little playing experience. So that's the most likely path for UR. I hope he surprises me. I hope he gets dramatically better at football throughout the training camp and makes that 53 and is active on game days, because what a story and what a physical freak. I mean, my goodness, I've never seen a 306-pounder, at least not many, built like him. He's got a beach body, for crying out loud. Good for him. But anyway, good on the Eagles for taking a chance on this young man, and I hope it works out. But for now, my best guess is phantom IR. On to the next. Zion Wilson. No recorded measurements on Mock Draftable, no RAS score, because he did not attend a public pro day post-draft, because at the time he was petitioning the NCAA for a 6th year of eligibility. Well, that petition failed, and he had to enter the draft, and he became a UDFA. I don't even know if he technically entered the draft or not. I think he did. And he became a UDFA. He was from Eastern Carolina. They play teams like Army and other schools whose names I cannot remember. Did play against Memphis this year. They had a game against Pitt in a bowl game, which they won, by the way. They played NC State. That's a recognizable college to college football fans. So there's some tape to go on. However, I watched week 1 versus NC State, and I could not understand why the Eagles paid this guy so much guaranteed. They gave him, for UDFA, a hefty amount guaranteed. I think it was around $225,000, but it was in that ballpark, and pretty impressive. That means they liked what they saw. And so I watched this game against NC State, and boy, I did not understand what they did. And I'm like, okay, what week of the season was this? It was like week 1 or something like that. I'm like, let me look at his stats, his game logs. And I noticed he padded his stats the last 4 to 6 games of the season. And the first 4 to 6, like, there were hardly any sacks, hardly any TFLs. All of a sudden, he got like 6 sacks in 6 games or something like that. I don't know the exact number. So what changed? I went to one of his later games. I think it was Memphis. And he looked so much more comfortable in his own skin as a defensive tackle. And the team seemed to know how to utilize him better. And he was in a rotation at defensive tackle, but they used him to his strengths. They put him up at nose, and he's a little bowling ball. I don't know his exact measurements since he didn't attend a public pro day, but I'm guessing 6'3"-ish, 316 pounds. Guessing. And I like the way he's built. He's low center of gravity, low to the ground. he can get under your pads with that nice wide butt of his and move you backwards. And that's what they did. They put him at nose. They put him in odd fronts at nose to occupy the guards to either side of him. He'd pick a side, give a brief little wiggle, just the briefest quick fake, a short little jab step laterally. It wasn't a wide, dramatic step. He's not a wide, dramatic, lateral guy. He's a bowling ball. He's more straight in terms of his movements. He's more linear. However, he does have lateral quickness in very short, tight spaces. He's one of those defensive tackles you think of that are low to the ground, low center of gravity, has quickness, but phone booth quickness. Has some lateral movement, but phone booth lateral movement. And they would occupy those guards, so he'd get a one-on-one with the center, and boom, whack him. And he'd get to the half man of that center and just push him backwards or make him look dumb with that little jab step and whack him and knock the center down. And he was in that quarterback's lap. He got some consistent pressure, and he racked up like 6 or 7 sacks. And he looks strong enough at the point of attack that he can 1.5 gap a little, even though I'm not sure that's his best use. I don't know how well he takes on double teams because unfortunately, in the 2 games I watched, you could tell with their scheme, he was not going to take on too many doubles. I think I saw him take on a double team once in 2 games. They had a lot of post-snap movement on early downs, on run downs, and it would have the effect of him rarely taking on a true double team. Oh, with Zion Wilson, I do not hate the signing. And by the way, the reason why he progressed so much the second half of the season was he never played defensive tackle before in college. He had a position switch for most of his college career. He was a deep reserve. He played a different position. I think it was even on the offensive side. I'm not sure. They decided to switch him to defensive tackle the year before, and those things tend to take a year. Year went by. In 25, he got his first playing time at defensive tackle, played in the rotation a good amount, and he shined the most down the stretch. And I think that's because he needed time. He needed experience. So I could see why the Eagles are thinking this guy might be better than the 6 or 7 sacks he put up. This guy might still have more development in his bones. So I'm glad they signed him. I think it was a worthy $225,000. And I feel good about him being added. And we will see in the preseason games how he takes on those double teams and how he 1.5 gaps. I did see 1 or 2 examples of 1.5 gapping, and he did a good, solid job of holding ground in his primary gap, shedding and getting to the secondary gap. He would get to the secondary gap a little late. It didn't look like length was his best attribute. And length can help with 1.5 gapping, especially the passive style of 1.5 gapping. And so he would get to the secondary gap, he would get on the tackle, but a lot of times it was 3 or 4 yards downfield.
Hey, it's Bill from the Bill Simmons podcast. FIFA World Cup 26 fans, listen up. Is the official beer sponsor of the FIFA World Cup 26. Michelob Ultra is giving away $1 million worth of FIFA World Cup 26 tickets and prizes. Enter now at MichelobUltra.com/superior access/FIFA World Cup 26. Michelob Ultra FIFA World Cup 26 superior access. No purchase necessary. Open U.S. residents 21 plus begins on December 1st, 2025. Ends on July 31st, 2026. Multiple entry periods. Visit www.MichelobUltra.com/superior access/FIFA World Cup 26 for free entry deadlines, prizes, and details.
Listen to the heartbeat.
Chevy is called the heartbeat of America for a reason. With SUVs made to move with your rhythm. The versatile Equinox tackles your entire day. The spacious Traverse fits your crew and your whole weekend. And Trax brings style with value you can count on. All infused with tech that has your back. So your drive always hits the right chord. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive.
Right now, get up to 15% off select storage solutions. Put heavy-duty HDX totes to good use, protecting what's important to you. The solid, impact-resistant design prevents cracking, and the clear base and sides make items easy to find even when the totes are stacked. Find select shelving and tote storage up to 15% off at the Home Depot to organize every room in your home, from your garage to your attic. Visit HomeDepot.com. How doers get more done.
This episode is brought to you by Google Chrome. You think you know a browser, but Gemini and Chrome? That's new. It can help you with practically anything on the web, like restoring a vintage motorcycle from a 50-page restoration blog, or finally break down that long article you've had open for weeks. Gemini and Chrome is here for it. Ready to make anything online make sense? There's no place like Chrome. Check responses, setup required, compatibility and availability varies, 18+.
Are all batteries the same? That's like asking if all soccer players are the same. Take Messi, the most decorated player ever. Is there any other player who has achieved that? No, just him. Now take Duracell. Is there any other battery with power boost ingredients inside? No, just Duracell. Remember, goats only trust goats because they're built different. And Messi only trusts Duracell.
So we'll see. I think he has a chance to be a nice find, and only time will tell. He was pretty good on slants. He did have good short area vertical burst. So while I think of him as more of a nose, I don't think of him as a pass rusher from the 3-tech position. Who knows? Maybe with some time he could become anything. But my hope, since I have run defense depth concerns, is that he can become the backup nose tackle and maybe take on double teams. Another thing about his game that I liked is, despite being a little bit bigger bodied fella, he could move down the field with second effort plays. If the play was behind him, he didn't stop and do that I'm exhausted jog that most defensive tackles do. Even if he was on the field for several snaps in a row, if the play was going past the line of scrimmage downfield, he'd turn and book downfield, and he would get in on the tackle pretty frequently. So that second effort stuff does get noticed, and that motor does get noticed, and that endurance, despite being a bigger bodied fella, that also gets noticed. So those are football plays too for a defensive tackle. They can also run down the field. It's legal. So nice addition, and we'll see how it plays out in camp. Next, Taquan Graham, 5-year veteran. He's entering his 6th year. Spent all 5 years with Atlanta, 4 of them on a rookie contract. He was their 5th-round pick. The 5th year, they signed him like a 1-year extension. Parts of 3 different seasons, he missed a chunk of playing time on the IR. The one time was a knee, another time was a pec. This last time was last year. He started the season on IR, and he didn't come in till later in the season. He played in maybe 2 or 3 games, and then they cut him. Now, with last year's IR excursion, they did not divulge what the injury was. It was undisclosed. So we don't know what was going on with him last year. We don't know what his story is. I watched maybe about 100 or so of his run defense snaps for the past couple of years, and I came away somewhat impressed. This is not your typical 1.5 gapper. He's more of a 1 gapper. He's not really your space eater. He is explosive on stunts. Probably more explosive on stunts than anyone I've mentioned yet. Pretty darn good on slants as well, but stunts in particular I liked. And he could one gap a little bit too. And even though he didn't have as much in his caboose as Zion Wilson, he didn't have as much junk in the trunk to hold up against the run. Even though he didn't have that, he had good second effort strength. He'd get pushed back a yard or two and then fight. Next thing you know, he'd shed that guy and get in on the play. And even when he got pushed back, he usually maintained decent position and helped clog things up. A lot of times I was watching the Falcons run D, and they were getting gashed on the ground in these games I watched. And it wasn't his fault. Other guys, some of them with bigger names, by the way, were playing worse than him. And the scheme was a little not my cup of tea. So kind of happy with the addition. Now, I don't know what's going on with him physically. If he's healthy, this is a nice pickup. They picked him up on our practice squad after he was cut last season, mid-season. Presumably, they gave him time to get healthy and learn the scheme, and he'll come back to camp healthy this year, and I like him. I just put up a clip of him on Blue Sky and also in the Discord at the Eagles Film Room, and he was allowed to one gap in this particular rep that I posted, and he just blew by a guy. He put on the Allen Iverson crossover, did a little club, a little rip, and jumped into the backfield and showed lateral quicks, showed explosiveness, and tracked down CMC, Christian McCaffrey, from behind and tackled him for a 2-yard gain on the other side of the line of scrimmage. So that's not a play a lot of defensive tackles can make. So I hope this guy stays healthy. I like the fact that we've added him. We re-signed him after the 2025 season for a low amount. He's only getting $125,000 guaranteed. Looks like a decent football player. I like the addition between Gabe Hall, Ty Robinson, Zion Wilson, Taquan Graham. There's enough guys there with some ability, some talent, some football acumen that I think that one of them should be able to rise to the top and become a solid DT4, maybe even a solid DT4 and DT5. We got some depth. It's possible none of these guys are the ideal space eater, but hey, we are talking about DT4 here. I would like to see them add a space eater. I'm hoping Zion Wilson can become that. I'm hoping Gabe Hall can become that. If they don't become big space eaters, I do hope that they add one. It's weird that Vic Fangio has this scheme where half the time or maybe more they're 1.5 gapping on rundowns, and yet he tends to go for movement guys instead of space eaters. We know Howie. He's like, how well can they move? What's their spark score? Can they sack the quarterback? Can they penetrate? That's all Howie looks at. He barely looks at whether or not they can 1.5 gap. I'm not even sure how he knows what 1.5 gapping is. So I'm sure he saw Taquan Graham was like, oh, I like this guy, regardless of the scheme. So I hope that someone can become a space eater or they add one. But even if they don't, after viewing some of these guys at the bottom of the depth chart, I am more optimistic about the defensive tackle depth than I was going into this exercise a couple days ago. So kudos to the Eagles for adding some football players to the 90-man roster. I believe that leaves us with the top three. We know them well. Moro Ojomo, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis. Moro Ojomo, my thoughts are keep doing what you're doing, my man. I hope that you don't do something dramatic and try and put on some sort of big size game. I like you just the way you are. You compliment Jalen Carter. You compliment Jordan Davis. You give us some nice pass rush. You give us a lot of smarts out there. You give us the ability to play some defensive end and some of the weird fronts that Vic Fangio will throw out there, some mint fronts, some condensed 40 front, and keep getting that quarterback, my man. Jalen Carter, stay healthy. When he's healthy, he's a beast. Now, people like to critique and pick apart his game when he's healthy, and that's fine. I'm sure there's ways he can improve. I'm sure people have some perspectives that I haven't considered. I just want the man to stay healthy and not spit on people, at least not get caught spitting on people, because when he's healthy, he's kind of a freak and he's a wrecking ball out there. He launches into people, he dents them back a yard or two, and I don't even know if I can call that 1.5 gap in, but it kind of is. I mean, when he played that year with Desai, he was more of a stay-at-home 1.5 gapper, trying to control primary and secondary gap. And he was solid at it, but not always amazing. And it looked like he wore down a little bit physically as the year went on. And I kept thinking to myself, they gotta get this guy going vertical a little bit more often, but they never did. And right off the bat, right out of the gate, Clint Hurt, I believe his name is, the defensive line coach, and Vic Fangio decided with Jalen Carter worked because they let him fire off the ball even when on neutral downs where he's trying to absorb blockers. He's firing off the ball and taking the fight more to the offensive line as opposed to doing more of a passive style 1.5 gapping as a run stuffer, and I like it. You don't have to play textbook 1.5 gap if you could knock the dude's ass 2 yards back into the backfield. I mean, the normal rules don't apply to you. Just knock a dude 2 yards back. You know what I'm saying? You can create plenty of disruption that way and probably affect two gaps in the process quite frequently, and he does. So just stay healthy, my man. And side note to the Eagles, not to Jalen Carter, when he gets in on condensed fronts and you put him a defensive end, stop one gapping him, please. Stop telling them, okay, this is your opportunity to play defensive end and take a wide angle. That has hurt us more than it's helped us. And frankly, it's kind of dumb when you think about schematically what's going on there. I know I just called Clint Hurt and Vic Fangio dumb. I shouldn't do that because they're both obviously smart. They're both obviously good coaches. But even good coaches and smart people do dumb things. I do some dumb things before breakfast. You know, everybody's got weaknesses. And I can tell you right now, the way they're utilizing him when they allow him to one gap at defensive end is a mistake. Put him in at 2-eye in those condensed fronts and let him explode vertically that way. Then he can impact the quarterback and the run game while still being gap sound. Side note, I saw one snap of Zion Wilson as a defensive end on a pass rush down, and he didn't do anything fancy. He didn't try to go around anybody. He was on a 45-degree angle, got a running start, and like a bowling ball, went straight through that poor college offensive tackle and drove him right back into the quarterback's lap. And that reminded me of Fletcher Cox. Now, obviously, Zion Wilson from East Carolina, undrafted free agent, is not Fletcher Cox 2.0. Please don't say that I said that. However, Fletcher Cox, he would occasionally on pass rush downs, not early neutral downs, get put out as a wide defensive end and didn't do anything fancy. He just rushed right through the offensive tackle, and it was nice. Totally collapsed the pocket, just not from the interior, and it was well done. And it gave other guys an opportunity to pass rush on the interior. To me, you know, if you're going to take a talented defensive tackle and let him pass rush a little bit or one gap a little bit from defensive end, let him do it on a pass rush down, not a neutral down where you might have to stop the run, and coach him to go straight through the offensive tackle, because offensive tackles, they're used to speed to power. They're not used to that kind of speed to power. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, that's a side note. Just stay healthy, Jalen. Stay healthy. Can the pass rush improve for Jordan Davis? Will he lose even more weight? He hinted that he might. Should he lose more weight? I don't know. It's an unknown. If he does, I hope it's not a dramatic amount of weight. I hope he's careful just to see how it affects him on the field. Obviously, he became a better overall football player last year because of that weight loss. He had more stamina. He had more ability to change direction and keep playing throughout the snap. There were times he was on slants where he would go on an aggressive gap slant, not a non-aggressive slant where he's just changing his position, but an aggressive gap slant where he's trying to penetrate. There'd be a second puller trying to down block on him, and he'd go even more lateral to run around two guys. And he'd still run around the two guys on the slant and get back laterally in the opposite direction and make a big play, a tackle. Not a lot of guys can do that. That shows mobility. That shows stamina and strength, and a little bit of explosiveness. And that's nice to see. So his overall game improved. He was much better flowing laterally against wide zone and outside zone type plays. He was better on the second effort plays, being able to make tackles that he just could not make before. He was better on slants. He was better on stunts because of that increased mobility. And he was better sacking the quarterback too. Now, he didn't get a lot of opportunities as a pass rusher on third down. That was still more a Moro Ojomo thing and Jalen Carter thing. But he did get some sacks. They weren't great pressures. He didn't get good, consistent pressure on the third down opportunities where he had an opportunity to pass rush, but he did show good athleticism, racking up a handful of cleanup sacks that I like to see. So can he improve as a pass rusher? I think he has it in his bones, even though he may never be an elite pass rusher. But even if he doesn't, I'm fine with the contract, folks. I'm fine. This is a good football player that dramatically impacts the game. You saw what happened in San Fran when he was out in the second half, and poor Byron Young had to play more snaps. Didn't go so well for us against the run. Did not. He is a vital member of this football team and probably one of the better defensive tackles in the NFL, frankly. He's got to be top 20, maybe top 10, even if he doesn't become an elite pass rusher. It's not always just about the pass rush. You got to get to third down to use that pass rush, folks. You got to get to it. But thank you for listening, everybody. Very optimistic and excited for this season and this upcoming training camp. We're not that many weeks away at this point. And don't forget to follow us at the Eagles Film Room on Patreon and the Big Legged Waistbenders podcast on the Pin and Pull Network, found on all your typical listening spots as well as YouTube. And never forget, Big Legged Waistbenders maybe don't deserve our draft picks, but they do deserve our love. Go Birds.